Welcome back from the break, Matrix. If you've just joined us, we are still doing your exam guide to help you prep for the upcoming exams. Well, this next competition is for anyone who's constantly running out of data or you just want to win yourself something. Waza Matrix is bringing you the hashtag Waza Winner competition, where 2 lucky matriculants stand a chance to win 2 gigs of data. So all you need to do to enter is head on over to our Facebook page and all of the details will be there. Thank you so much, Tando, and over to you.
Thank you once again, Uni. Welcome back, boys and girls. We are continuing with our exam guide. Now we are going to be looking at Section B. I'll be helping you guys on how to attempt your Section B in the exam. Right, we start with our list or name type of questions. These questions are normally question 2.11 and question 3.11 and question 4.11. Right, these questions are lower cognitive level questions. They are normally 2 marks in the exam. There is no explanation that is required for these questions. Right, for example, if you are asked to name 2 financial markets in the secular flow, right, what you need to do is to get straight to the answer and you need to just write because you are just simply asked to name. Right, your answer would look something like that. Number 1, money market. Number 2, capital market. And then number 3, we have got our foreign exchange market. You can just put a bullet next to your answer to indicate that is the start of an answer. You don't have to explain in this type of a question. Right, for example, this is another example. We have got name 2 types of economic indicators that are related to price changes. Again, here, you do not need to explain, boys and girls. You simply need to go straight to the answer. Your answer is your PPI and your CPI. Right, please note, boys and girls, that you can use acronyms, you can use abbreviations for this section of the question paper. So as you are answering your section B and your section C, you are allowed to use acronyms and abbreviations. Like I said earlier on, you cannot use acronyms, you cannot use abbreviations for question 1.3 only. But the rest of the paper, you are fine. Right, then we move on. We look at questions that are mid-cognitive level. These are your how questions, your what questions, your why questions. You need to be guided by the mark allocation. Right, e.g. for a 2-mark question, you only require 1 point. If it's a 4-mark question, then again, you need at least minimum of 2 points there. Again, you need to answer the question in the context that it's given. I've got an example that I'm going to tackle with you. The example says, what effect will quotas have on imports? I'll take it again. What effect will quotas have on imports? Here is my solution and how I attempted it. It says, imports become more expensive as there are less goods to import. This is a restriction on imports. Right, one thing that I need to point out to you, boys and girls, is you need to answer this type of or these type of questions in full sentences. Do not use point form for this type of questions. Right, another example is, what would the effect be on inflation if the increase in labor productivity is lower than the increase in wages? Normally, as I go through this type of questions, I underline the keywords so that I'm able to answer the question appropriately. I'll take the question again. What would the effect be on inflation if the increase in labor productivity is lower than the increase in wages? Right, my answer is inflation will increase because the aggregate demand will be higher than the aggregate supply. I repeat once again, boys and girls, these type of questions, you need to attempt them in full. Do not write points, do not list, do not just state. You need to make sure that your answer is in full. Right, as we continue with our section B, we have again mid-cognitive level questions. We are looking at our question 2.2, our question 3.2, 3.3, 4.2, and 4.3. Right, these ones you are given something in the form of a graph, a cartoon, a table, an extract, real data, or a combination of a graph and an extract. Right, then you are given items or questions in the data response that range from easy to difficult questions. You need to know that questions, or the questions that you are going to get from the data response, they are scaffolded from easy to difficult. Right. This is an example. Right, for example, you are given the curve below. We have a curve there. All of you are able, I think, by this time to identify that this is a Leffer curve. Right, let's look at the questions that you can get typically from a diagram like this or from a curve like this. The first question that you can get ideally is, which curve is depicted in the above graph? Please note that normally when you are asked to identify a diagram or to identify a curve, right, it's normally 1 mark at most. Right, again, I encourage you, boys and girls, just merely list. Right, so the answer to that is Leffer curve, and the maximum you can get for that is 1 mark. So you just merely list there. Don't waste time on such questions. Another question typically that you can get is, which tax rate will generate maximum revenue for the government? You go back to the diagram, you look at the diagram, at what tax rate do we get the maximum revenue? Let's check, boys and girls. At a tax rate of 20%, the government is able to generate tax revenue of 100 billion. At a tax rate of 40%, the government is able to generate tax revenue of 130 billion. And then again, when we move to a tax rate of 60%, the government will generate a tax revenue of 100. You see there is a decrease there. So our maximum there is at a tax rate of 40%. Now let's look at the answer. The answer is 40%. Again, typically, you can expect 1 mark for such a question. As you can see, boys and girls, the questions keep on scaffolding. Now you get typically another question like, briefly explain the term progressive tax rate. Now the mark allocation becomes higher because now the level of difficulty is obviously higher than the name and the list type of questions. Right? The answer to this would be, a progressive tax rate is a tax that levies a lower rate on low income earners than those with a higher income. So basically, what are we saying? We are saying under a progressive tax system, high income earners are taxed more than lower income earners. Right? We are still continuing with our scaffolding of questions. What effect will a decrease in the tax rate from 60% to 40% have on tax revenue? Right? Let's go back to the graph again. As you can see, boys and girls, that when we decrease our tax revenue from 60 to 40, right, at 60% we get tax revenue of 100 billion, and then at 40% we get a tax revenue of 130 billion. So when we reduce our tax from 60% to 40%, our revenue will increase from 100 to 130. So here is the answer there. It says the tax revenue will rise from 100 billion to 130 billion. That is a 30 billion increase. Again, like I said, boys and girls, these are typically full sentence questions. You need to answer the question in full. Right, that's it on those ones. Let's look at the next question. Explain the implication of a tax rate of 60% on the taxpayer. Explain the implication of a tax rate of 60% on the taxpayer. Look at the mark allocation. It's a 4-mark question, meaning to say you need a minimum of 2 points for that one. Right? This is not completely taken or extracted from the graph. Now you need to apply your knowledge on tax revenue there. Right? The answer there is a tax rate of 60% implies that the taxpayer will only earn 40% of their income of which they work for. Taxpayers might be demotivated to work because more than half, which is 60% of their income, will be going to the state, right? Resulting in tax evasion, where taxpayers might not declare their income to avoid paying excessive amounts of tax. Like I said, these should be answered in full. Answer these type of questions in full. Right? Maximum of 2 points there. I gave you guys a third point just in case, but you need to make sure that when a question has got 4 marks, you need a maximum of 2 points there. Right, let's move on. Now we move on to our higher cognitive level questions. These are typically your question 2.4, question 3.4, question 4.4, typically again question 2.5, question 3.5, and also question 4.5. These carry 8 marks in the exam, and they are very important. You need to ensure that you attempt these questions in the exam, as they carry the bulk of the marks. An example of such a question that you can typically find in the exam is discuss the multiplier effect on national income for 8 marks. Discuss the multiplier effect on national income. Like I said to you guys earlier on, 8 marks means a minimum of 4 points in your solution there. Right, let's look at the answer. The multiplier relates to how much the national income changes as a result of an injection or a withdrawal. An increase in injections into the economy, we are looking at our injections, investment, government spending, or exports, will lead to a proportionate increase in national income. Right? Extra spending would have a knock-on effect and create even more spending. The size of the multiplier depends on the level of leakages. The size of the multiplier is directly proportional to the level of national income created. Like I said, boys and girls, a minimum of 4 points there. And again, you need to show the link between the multiplier and national income there. Typically, again, such questions, you will get questions like differentiate between, compare and contrast, and evaluate question. If it's a differentiate between question, I encourage you, boys and girls, to draw a table, right? When you draw your table, for example, if the question says compare and contrast or differentiate between exogenous and endogenous explanations, you come here, you write endogenous, and then you also write exogenous there. Then you explain your points in full. Endogenous is also known as Keynesians, right? Exogenous is also known as monetarists. You are explaining. For every point that you explain, you get your 2 full marks there. And then when in doubt, if you are not sure of what else to explain in question 2.4, then give examples of what endogenous explanations are and of what exogenous explanations are.
Thank you, Tando. Matrix, we are going to take a quick break, but before we do, don't forget to send us your questions and your comments on all our social media platforms and let us know how we can help you guys. We'll see you straight after the break.